safe and accepted, and yet there's still places where they are subject to attacks.
The recent wave of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation even prompted the Human Rights Commission earlier this month to declare a state of emergency for LGBTQ plus people living in the U.S. Axios local reporter Erica Herron from Indianapolis says concerns have been growing in her state.
We have definitely seen that spike and been part of that wave of kind of anti-LGBTQ plus sentiment and rhetoric, and even, laws. Our state legislature passed some laws targeting the transgender community in Indiana this year. So it's been kind of a tough time for that community in our state.
That's some of what Erica heard when she visited the Back Door, Indiana's only lesbian bar.
The folks I talked to said that's why spaces like the Back Door are even more important now, so people have a place where they can come be their authentic selves.
Many lesbian bars actually used to exclude transgender people, but now that's changing too. Bobby Moore, the owner of Slammers in Columbus, Ohio, says her bar is thriving because of its inclusivity. She spoke to Axios Columbus's Alyssa Widman-Meese.
We're able to bring people here who are afraid to maybe venture out in other places, wherever they land, and be clear out of that too.
One of the newest lesbian bars in the country just opened in New York City. Axios Today producer Lydia McMullen-Laird visited the Bush, which calls itself a dyke bar for queers, and spoke with barback Francis Huntley. Huntley said they feel more comfortable at the Bush than in straight bars where they work, or in New York City's many gay bars.
I don't really think about myself and how I'm presenting and how I'm interacting with people. I'm not thinking about my gender presentation as much here, for example, or my voice or things like that. I feel a lot more relaxed in that sense.
Last weekend during New York City's Pride festivities, the Bush had people down the block waiting to get in. The bottom line, demand is still strong for welcoming spaces like these in places around the country. And that's it for us this week. Axios Today is produced by Fonda Mwangi, Lydia McMullen-Laird, and Robin Link, along with senior sound engineer Alex Sugiar. Ben O'Brien also mixes the show. Alexandra Botti is our supervising producer. Asia Whitaker-Moore is Axios' executive editor, and Sarah Gailani-Gu is Axios' editor-in-chief. I'm Nyla Boodoo. Stay safe, enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday.
Hello, I'm Esther Morel. I'm a psychotherapist and host of the podcast Where Should We Begin? I invite you to enter into my office and to listen in on the sessions that I conduct with people from all walks of life, grappling with the challenges and choices in their relationships. I'll be dropping new episodes every Monday starting July 10. Listen and follow Where Should We Begin on your favorite podcast app.
Hi, it's Phoebe. I want to tell you about something new here at Criminal. Something we think you might like. It's called Criminal Plus, and it's our new membership program. Criminal Plus members will get to listen to Criminal without any ads. You can also listen ad-free to our other shows, This Is Love and Phoebe Reads a Mystery. Each month, we'll also bring you special behind-the-scenes bonus content, off-the-cuff conversations with me and the very talented people who make this show. Plus, if you're one of the first 500 people to sign up for the premium tier, we'll send you a special limited edition Criminal tote bag with a note from me inside. So, to recap, that's 4 ad-free episodes of Criminal and 2 ad-free episodes of This Is Love every month, plus exclusive show merchandise, a special members-only monthly episode where I tell bad jokes, and maybe most importantly, you get to support the show. Just go to thisiscriminal.com/plus. That's thisiscriminal.com/plus. We can't wait for you to join. Now, here's the show.
Her sons told me she was born to sing. She was born to perform. There was always music in the house. They might not have often had food or, heating, but there was always music playing.
Writer Jeff Maish.
They recalled she would take a speaker and run it outside and she would perform as Aretha, and everyone in the neighbourhood would come and gather around the house and watch her perform. It was like going to a local Aretha Franklin concert, and they said that she was her happiest when she was singing, no matter what was going on in her personal life, in her private life. It seemed that whenever she was singing, she just seemed happy.
Mary Jane Jones was a member of a church gospel choir called The Great Gate in her hometown of West Petersburg, Virginia.
And they would tour around America performing in churches all across the country.
In 1969, Mary Jones was 27 years old.
She was a single mother, and she had 3 young children at home. And she sang at church, but she also had a secret double life, performing in local nightclubs to earn some extra money. When Motown music emerged, it wasn't accepted by the church. They thought it was sinful. Some of the lyrics were a bit too risque. So it wasn't, she would have to perform under a different name. She performed under Vicky Jones.
And these clubs were thought to be non-church-going places.
Yes, houses of sin, drinking, dancing, sometimes violence. You wouldn't want to be caught there by other members of the parish.
Mary Jones wore costumes and a wig so no one would recognize her. She was paid $10 a night. And what was she like as a singer? I mean, was it clear that this woman had great talent?
It was clear to everyone who heard her sing in church and in the clubs that she had incredible talent.
And what people noticed most of all is that Mary Jones sounded just like Aretha Franklin.
She'd modelled her voice on Aretha. She would listen to Aretha's records. She taught herself to sing by listening to Aretha. So she was so convincing as Aretha, she would get mistaken for the real Queen of Soul. I think Aretha Franklin was a role.
If it would have helped us transition into something a little more permanent.
During the pandemic, the state dramatically scaled up the motel program with the help of federal COVID relief dollars to meet a new level of need. But those funds ran out, and the state began evicting people. The reality of Vermont's affordable housing shortage came into stark relief. Most shelters were already full. Aid organizations began handing out free tents to people like Tam. Others, like Colby Lynch, left the state. She moved in with family in New Hampshire.
I'm just thankful that my mom is able to take me in and I'm not sleeping in a car.
Lynch had a job at a bowling alley, and she'd been searching for months for a place to rent, with no luck. The day of her eviction, it was 90 degrees. She drove away. She saw many of her former neighbors sitting on the curb with nowhere else to go.
They didn't have vehicles. They were literally out there until their stuff.
A second wave of evictions was scheduled for July. It would affect another 2,000 or so people, including children and people with serious medical issues. Rick DeAngelis is the executive director of Good Samaritan Haven. They operate 3 shelters in central Vermont, all full. DeAngelis says he and other advocates for the unhoused tried to sound the alarm to state lawmakers, pushing them to extend the program a bit longer.
I'm hoping that this is one of those turning points. I don't know, maybe that's just looking at it through rose-colored glasses or something, but I'm hopeful of that.
Vermont's democratically controlled legislature and Republican governor agreed to extend the motel program for about another year. Senate Majority Leader Allison Clarkson helped push it through.
It became apparent that the transition plan was not in place and that to continue the emergency pandemic plan was the wisest move to give everybody an opportunity to develop the housing alternatives that we needed to house the 1,800 remaining unsheltered Vermonters.
gender, which is essentially what Elizabeth Ann and her descendants could be, would be so valuable.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking, I would assume that inbreeding would be a huge issue here, right?
It is very much an issue, and the captive breeding program works very hard to minimize that inbreeding, but it's inevitable. And so all black-footed ferrets today are about second cousins.
Okay.
And we do see indications of what we would call inbreeding depression, meaning physiological changes that are likely due to inbreeding. That's why it's so important to add an influx of genetic diversity.
This is Science Friday from WNYC Studios. I'm speaking with Dr. Sam Wisely about cloning for conservation. From an ethical perspective, is cloning these ferrets justifiable?
That was exactly the question that we set out to answer, and ultimately we came up in our analysis that we did think so. And part of that is because the goals of this, like I said, are actually pretty traditional conservation reasons, and that being genetic rescue for conducting this. So it's using a new technology to do what we would consider a traditional conservation management action. That's very different from using cloning for, say, a new application of technology, say gene editing, for instance. That's not what is happening here.
Mm-hmm. There's this argument out there that cloning is a waste of resources. I mean, we've talked about how it's very expensive. It takes a lot of resources to do this, and that we could be saving a species that has a better shot of surviving. How do you pick that argument apart?
So you're absolutely right, and we did analyze that. In this specific case, there are a lot of donors that are outside of the federal system. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has not picked up the cost for a lot of this. There are a lot of not-for-profits that are interested in incorporating biotechnology into conservation. So the research and development end of it has not had a significant cost to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be costs in the future associated with managing these cloned species, trying to reintegrate them or integrate them into the captive population. However, I think that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the technical team that supports U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in making these decisions, that's the Black-Footed Ferret Recovery Implementation Team, all agree that the future of black-footed ferrets is much more certain because of this cloning effort.
Why do you care so much about saving the black-footed ferret?
For me personally, I think the prairie ecosystem, which these guys come from, is really one of the most changed ecosystems in North America. And it was humans that changed it. And I think as a conservation biologist, I feel like I have a moral obligation to try and restore these prairies because it was people who changed these prairies in the first place.
Mm-hmm. There's been some buzz around resurrecting long-gone species. There are some biotech companies that want to bring back the woolly mammoth, for example, using cloning. Ethically speaking, do you evaluate cloning differently when it comes to an extinct species versus one that is still alive?
Well, I think you use the same bioethical principles, and your very first question at the beginning of this segment asks it. You can do it, but should you do it? And what are the goals that you have for doing it? Why do you want to resurrect a woolly mammoth? Do you want to restore the prairies to a Pleistocene or Holocene environment? Restoring the environments to 50,000 years ago or 20,000 years ago? Are you doing it to make a splash? Are you doing it to make money? I think those need to be evaluated. So I think it is incumbent on people who are trying to resurrect dead animals and extinct animals to go through this bioethical process.
Dr. Sam Wisely is a professor of wildlife ecology and conservation at the University of Florida. That's based in Gainesville, Florida. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
After the break, we'll celebrate the 20th anniversary of the CubeSat, a satellite that makes space research cheaper and more accessible than ever before. Stay with us. This is Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
Science Friday is supported by MathWorks, creators of MATLAB and Simulink software for technical computing and model-based design. MathWorks, accelerating the pace of discovery in engineering and science. Learn more at mathworks.com. Science Friday is also supported by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, working to enhance public understanding of science, technology, and economics in the modern world, and the National Institute for Healthcare Management Foundation, NICM, or at NIHCM.org. Science Friday is produced by the Science Friday Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing the public's access to science and scientific information. Learn more about their work at sciencefriday.com.
Good afternoon, it's 3:39. This is 91.7 WVXU. The forecast for tonight's spotty storms and muggy with a low of 70. Some scattered showers and storms tomorrow, very muggy, a high of 86. Emergency weather sirens may be sounded tonight and tomorrow along the northern Kentucky riverfront in the event of a severe thunderstorm alert. Homeland Security Emergency Management is making the temporary change because of the threat of severe weather and the large outdoor crowds expected in the area. Kenton County says you should seek shelter if you hear the sirens. The Kenton County parking garage in Covington will be available for anyone who needs shelter. Cooper Road is closed both directions between Montgomery and Maine because of a fire, and it's in the cleanup stages. A wreck has the left lane blocked on the lateral westbound just after Reading. A wreck has the left lane blocked southbound 71 after 73. Wreck at Galbraith and Clovernook, eastbound 35 at US 68, 275, State Route 129 westbound approaching Princeton, Glendale as well.
Support comes from the Summit Hotel, a 4-diamond hotel located in Madisonville, less than 10 minutes from downtown Cincinnati. Currently hiring for valet, sales and catering, promotions, housekeeping, maintenance, and food and beverage. You can find your next career at the Summit Hotel by applying online at thesummithotel.com/careers. It's 86 degrees in Cincinnati, 85 in Dayton at 3:40.
This is Science Friday, and I'm Kathleen Davis. And now it's time to check in on the state of science. This is Kit Yard, WWNO, St. Louis Public Radio, Iowa Public Radio News. Local stories of national significance. 20 years ago today, professors and students from Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, California, sent an invention into space for the very first time. It's called a CubeSat, a very small satellite that changed space research forever. And it's what many people call the cheapest way to access space. The technology has become so ubiquitous in rocket launches that it's sometimes hard to keep track of just how many CubeSats are sent into space every week. Reporter Michelle Loxton followed the history of the CubeSat for a recent episode of her podcast, The 101, that's out of KCLU Public Radio in Thousand Oaks, California. Welcome back to Science Friday, Michelle.
Thank you, Kathleen.
So describe the CubeSat for me. I mean, what does this look like and what does it do?
So a CubeSat is the shape and size of a square tissue box. From the outside, it looks like this miniature metal box or cube, and it contains all the things you'd find in a satellite: electronics, sensors, and all sorts of systems. In terms of what it does, this is so diverse. It all depends on what science a CubeSat is sent into space to do. Take imagery, send communications, or perhaps even test new technology. They all look like these tiny cubes when they're sent into space, but once they're pushed out of the rockets they were hitching a ride on, they transform. They can be these solar panels opening up, they can be solar sails. When they're in orbit, they all look different.
So when the CubeSat was created 20 years ago, what problem was it meant to solve?
It all starts with Jordi Puig-Suari, a now retired professor from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. He was teaching students who wanted to be aerospace engineers. But the problem was that the space hardware they were working on was not ending up in space. You see, none of the rocket owners were very keen on putting student satellites on their billion-dollar rockets, and if an opportunity did come up, it was just too expensive. So Fuchswari, with the help of another professor, Bob Twiggs at Stanford, said, we need to solve this. The students who will be the future aerospace engineers need to work on space hardware. So they said, what if we create something super small? They thought there must be like a tiny space on a rocket we can fit our satellite. And being so small, it won't be as expensive. Then they had to quell the fears of the rocket owners who didn't want this tiny satellite being a risk to their whole mission. So they